We're coming to you from the DraftKings.com podcasting studios. DraftKings.com, America's one-day fantasy sports site, where it's like a new season every time you play. DraftKings.com.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the new ESPN app. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and all guests join us. Well, that's not the one I want to do. We're presented by Progressive Insurance, and you can send me a tweet at the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. That is at Bomani_Jones. We got Warren Moon, Hall of Fame quarterback Warren Moon, joining us at 9:30 tonight. You want to check that one out. Speaking of quarterbacks, the Eagles put Matt Barkley on the curb, basically. And we're like, yo, if you want to pick him up, you know, you want to throw a little something at us, for it, we'd appreciate it, but we ain't even really tripping.
Right next to the couch you had in college.
No, that's exactly what it is. That's like you put that couch on the corner, and you're like, yo, y'all can have it. You ever see the Seinfeld where Jerry's car got overrun with body odor, and he just threw the keys to somebody to give it away, and then the dude got in and was like, nah, never mind? I feel like this is kind of a similar situation. Poor Matt Barkley, man. Matt Barkley, can you imagine the pressure that was on Matt Barkley yesterday, knowing, look, if you don't play well, Tim Tebow and his homeboy will, and you're going to wind up out of a job. And then you are not just out of a job, but Shannon, as you had put it before, you are losing your job to someone who is inadequate at the biggest thing you have to be able to do in this job, which is to throw the football.
Yeah, you have to feel bad about that. But look on the bright side for Barkley, at least. Instead of just getting cut, he gets traded. So it appears that someone wants him, right?
For a conditional 7th-round pick. A conditional 7th-round pick. They gave that dude away. Basically, all Bruce Arians did was jump in front of the line. And you know why? Because when you get cut to make room for Tim Tebow, who the hell's supposed to sign you? Now, I admit, I'm being selfish about this as a good company man. I think Tim Tebow's contributions to the SEC network are very important and are very valuable for a burgeoning property, and we need all the guys that we can get out here to make our SEC coverage top-notch. We get them out there. We got Feinbaum. We got Maria Taylor. We got dudes that used to play football, the homie Boogers over there. That's what they need, man. It's Tim Tebow. They need a quarterback, too, and he can be the quarterback on that team.
Absolutely.
He ain't about to be the quarterback on no real team, but he can be the quarterback on that team. But it looks like he's going to make the team, and there's nothing you can say. If that last preseason game was supposed to matter, like if it meant anything at all, then Tebow's got the job. Like if there was any confusion as to what was going to wind up happening, then Tebow's got the job. There's just no way around it, right? I don't feel like putting up with everything that comes with it, but that means he's got the job. And to Chip Kelly, I say, good luck, buddy, because you're the guy that's going to have to deal with this now. Like, never forget that year that it all got cracking in Denver. Tebow was not the backup quarterback. Wasn't he the third-string quarterback? And then they got down in that game, and they threw Tebow out there like, fine, give the fans something. The next thing you know, they come back from behind, and now Tebow's got the job. And then what happened was the most maddening football season of my life. Because I got no beef with Tim Tebow. Like, I have no reason to dislike Tim Tebow. I think that's something that people get confused with about me all the time. I have no reason to dislike Tim Tebow. He seems like a nice enough guy. He looks like he makes pretty decent conversation. I got no problem with him. My problem's with y'all and the way y'all talk about him. Like you never watched football before. Like you imagine how frustrating it'll be for Robert Griffin hearing the way people glass half full everything Tim Tebow does. Like, people talk about Robert Griffin should be out the league in the next 3 years and hoping that Tim Tebow can stick around.
Wow.
Imagine that. Because can I tell you a dirty little secret? Like, I'm not going there. I'm just telling you the truth about this, okay? Nobody gets more frustrated watching Tim Tebow than, like, fringe black quarterbacks. I've talked to a few of them. They be mad about Tim Tebow, and understandably so, because, like, when you're a black quarterback and you get your chance and it doesn't work, you're probably not getting that chance number 2. Like, it's probably not going down. Go look how many of those guys' careers, like, abruptly end at 30. They just stop. Like Aaron Brooks. And Shannon, we talked about this. Aaron Brooks.
Right.
Aaron Brooks won the first playoff game ever for the New Orleans Saints. Do you realize how sorry the Saints were? Like, I know there's a bunch of y'all that are only old enough maybe to know this Drew Brees thing. You're like, the Saints have always been competitive. Man, please. The Saints was garbage for 20 straight years. They didn't make the playoffs their first 20 years.
The Aints.
The Aints with them paper bags. By the way, I grew up a Falcons fan, so Saints jokes, always welcome here. Anyway, they used to wear them Ain't bags to the games, everything else. Archie Manning running for his life. Hey, man, Aaron Brooks, quarterback that won a playoff game for the Saints. You talk about Tim Tebow winning a playoff game against the Steelers. We talking about the Saints, right? Aaron Brooks is out of the league at 30. Out of the league. Why? Because he played poorly with the Raiders. Meanwhile, Carson Palmer, coming back from an ACL tear, getting ready to take over another job.
And a retirement too. Let's not forget, Carson Palmer retired. He had a stint with the with the Raiders. Retired, had a stint with the Raiders. Knee blown out. He about to start another season.
Hold up, you forgot. He quit his job in Cincinnati. Remember that? When he just quit his job? He put a for sale sign up in the yard and just quit his job? And then got lucky with that trade that sent the Raiders back like 10 years because they gave up so much to get Carson Palmer? But I'm just telling you, like, those are the guys that watch Tim Tebow and get the most frustrated. Like, I remember seeing Cordell Stewart on TV once talking about Tim Tebow. He could barely contain himself. He was so salty. He was so mad. So mad. Yeah, y'all talking about I can't throw. Y'all saying I can't play. But there's Tebow. He's out there. And now Chip Kelly's got to deal with that. Because, look, let me bottom line this for you. Sam Bradford's going to get hurt. Okay? I'm not wishing injury upon Sam Bradford. But, Shannon, has there been an NFL season where Sam Bradford did not get hurt?
I don't believe so.
I think maybe his rookie year. But I think after that, he's gotten hurt every year. There also, by the way, hasn't been a year where Sam Bradford averaged 7 yards per passing attempt. But that's neither here nor there. Bradford's gotten hurt every year. The starting quarterback for Chip Kelly in the NFL, granted it's only been 2 years, but the starting quarterback for the Eagles has gotten hurt every year. Every year. So Sam Bradford's going to get hurt. I don't think there's anything more reasonable to presume than Sam Bradford's going to get hurt, which then means you go to Mark Sanchez. Let me tell you something, man. Once you go to Mark Sanchez, streets are talking about Tebow. Like, that's it. Once it goes there, the streets are talking. If we already playing Mark Sanchez, baby, who cares?
And we've seen this before, and it's happened. It's not like it hasn't happened. We've seen it. We've seen it in the NFL.
Right. And I think that Chip Kelly – see, something I don't think that Chip Kelly is getting discussed enough about with him is for all the things about the Chip Kelly genius, and I'm intrigued by a lot of the things that he's trying to do, and I think his offense gets a bit of a bad rap as being – his offense is more fundamentally an NFL offense than people realize. I think the problem with Chip Kelly is not the scheme. The problem is play calling. When it comes up time to play against really good teams, and this goes back to Oregon, his play calling gets real lemon booty. It gets real tight, gets real nervous. All right? Like, that I think is the biggest issue. But I also think that Chip Kelly has convinced himself that he doesn't need a good quarterback to win. And let's be clear. He wouldn't be the first if he is a great coach, which I think certainly remains to be seen. But if Chip Kelly were a great coach, he wouldn't be the first great coach to feel that way. Shannon, did you know that's basically how Bill Walsh felt about quarterbacks?
Really?
Bill Walsh was just looking for somebody that he could program to run the algorithm of his offense. That's all he needed. Like, remember, the West Coast offense as designed didn't have audibles in it. It didn't have audibles because the idea was that the play accounted for anything that the defense might have done. How narcissistic do you have to be to have an offense that doesn't allow for audibles? Not we don't let this quarterback call audibles. Like, we don't call audibles. Steve Young, when he was with the 49ers, there weren't audibles. You just had to ride it out. Jerry Rice could be guarded by 7 dudes, but that pass to Jerry Rice is what we're calling. That's what it's going to be. Chip Kelly seems to be also on that same kick because none of these quarterbacks he's got. Look, I feel like we've seen enough of Sam Bradford. Sam Bradford's just not that good. And if he turns out to play very well this year, that'll be great. But that's not going to change the fact that Sam Bradford's not that good. But that being said, Chip Kelly had Nick Foles out here throwing 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, which is, by far, has anybody ever played farther over their heads than Nick Foles did that one year? You know how far Nick Foles played over his head that year? That when it came time to trade him, all they could get for him was Sam Bradford. Because people will look it up like, come on, but this ain't real.
And then the Rams, the team that traded for Foles, only gave him a 2-year extension.
Yeah, they just gave him an extension to buy him some time. Like, if they don't get into a situation where they can take a quarterback this year, all they did was buy him some time. Like, Chip Kelly, if he keeps doing this with just like any old quarterback, like the Michael Vick years, the stretch that Michael Vick played for, Michael Vick averaged something like 8.5 yards an attempt that year for the Eagles. Like, they could do some pretty incredible things. But Matt Barkley, I imagine you feel real bad about yourself right now. I imagine you feel real disappointed. You're real bummed out. You know, you lost your job. Tim Tebow's probably going to keep his job. I'm sure you feel really bad right now. And I'm here to tell you something. You should. Hope you feel awful. Hope you feel miserable, because I feel awful and miserable knowing that this Tebow thing just keeps on coming up. He's like God's cockroach. We can't kill him for nothing.
Bomani.
By the way, some of you guys not so happy about things I had to say in the last segment. I mentioned this thing, the black quarterbacks operate with a shorter rope, don't tend to get that second chance. And some guy said to me, you're wrong. Michael Vick got a second chance. All right, thanks for pulling out that one. There we go. Shannon, you got anybody else? Like somebody who had ended, like Aaron Brooks got a chance with the Raiders. Like, it's not an absolute point. You can go and find some dudes that have gotten other jobs, right? But the rope is just shorter. I'm not lying to you when I tell you this part. Those dudes who felt like they did not get their adequate chance in the NFL, they don't like Tim Tebow at all. Now, look, you may disagree about whether or not they got adequate chance. I'm not going to argue with you about that fact. I'm just telling you how those cats tend to feel when they see Tim Tebow out there in the pocket looking like he's doing like a derivative, trying to find an open receiver. Like, dang, how's the power rule go again? Oh, sacked again. 888-729-3776 is the telephone number. College football season started, Shannon. You excited?
Extremely.
You're right. Now, you rock with the Virginia Tech Hokies because you married into that, right?
It keeps for a happy life, happy wife, happy life, yes. Yeah,
so you root for them. I think my favorite moment of you rooting for Virginia Tech was that time that Michael Vick ate up the Giants in the second half. You remember that time when that happened?
What? Something
remember
happened?
That? Because you remember that, Shannon. You were a Giants fan.
Yeah, we were winning that game. It was great. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the punt went to Deshaun Jackson. Remember that?
Matt Dodge? Yeah, I remember
Yeah. That was a great one. But anyway, they played Ohio State. You think they're going to get them again this year?
Probably not, just being realistic. But I think they have a better shot than most are giving them.
I think they have a better shot this year than they had last year.
I think you're right. One thing they did last year on offense was converted on third downs. They're going to have to do that again this year. In Ohio State, they're missing a lot of weapons on the offense. Yes, you have Ezekiel Elliott. You'll have the quarterbacks who I'd imagine that both will play, but you're going to have some inexperienced guys out there at wideout. So I would imagine that Virginia Tech's going to probably load the box and bring even more pressure than they did last year, which is kind of crazy to think.
And it's also, I think the best way to put this, it's going to be a different kind of loud in there, right? Like, it's not as though Ohio State has never played in a loud stadium. Like, they've never been anywhere that's loud. But I feel like the 80,000 seat loud is different than that 55,000 seat loud. And that 55,000 seat loud is just a lot more maniacs. Like, it gets loud at Lane. We all agree there. It gets loud at Lane. That's just a different kind of loud, and they're going to be ready. They've been drinking all day. It's a holiday. Woo!
Oh, yeah, they had the whole weekend off. Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of mason jars in Southwest Virginia.
Yeah, that's the thing about it. Like, I feel like you and I follow ACC football because we lived in that sort of place, right? I think Virginia Tech's one of those schools that people don't actually know where Virginia Tech is. Like, they're aware of it, but that Virginia that you're probably thinking of, it ain't really got a whole lot to do with where Virginia Tech is. That's Mason Jar, Virginia, right there.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, right, we're on the cusp. College football season started yesterday. We got most of the games kicking off tomorrow and at some point this weekend. You got to give me a playoff. What's your playoff prediction?
I mean, it's going to be 4 teams. It's going to be 4 of them. I don't know.
Some college students?
Yeah, don't nobody know. Like, let me tell you something, man. Look. I don't do a lot of predictions, right? Because generally it's just guessing. Like, and there's only but a certain level of expertise you can have. I'll give you factors generally that you can watch for, but like if I'm making a prediction where I really think something's going to happen, I think that there's an overwhelming amount of evidence pointing in that direction, right? But generally I feel like these things can go either way. But in football, I don't like doing macro level projections for the end of the season, if for no other reason than the ACLs hadn't started tearing yet. No disrespect.
And then here's another factor as well, and we kind of talked about this off air. who knows what these 18 to 22, 23-year-old kids are going to do. And if you look at a team like Ohio State, how are they going to handle being the hunted this year? That's another factor. I mean, there's a lot of factors. I think a lot more factors that go into this with college than you do when you have the pros.
Yeah, well, the big thing is, man, they college students. Like, you want me to be out here trying to predict the behavior of college students like I ain't never met a college student before. They're the least reliable people on earth. They are. Like, look, tell a college student that you got $200 and they have to come get it from your house in 1 hour flat. And if they come 1 hour and 1 second, then they're not going to get the money. You still going to have that $200. You still are. They are just the most unreliable people on earth. Like, I was talking to Lou Holtz about this once, did a radio interview with him, and he's like, the greatest hazard of being a college football coach is if the girlfriend breaks up with them, it's an exam that they're scared about, whatever it is. That's just a little bit too much for them to hold together. They're not built for that. They're not prepared for that. So, like, what'll take Ohio State down in the end? It's crazy when you look at teams and they just look like they didn't want to be around each other. Who in the locker room fighting over a girl this time, right? Who stole the Xbox game out of Zeke's room, right? Zeke like, I don't even want to run. Why? JT came in when I wasn't there. I ain't seen the game yet. Like, these things, these are realistic, actual things that come up with college football, where, like, I can do the best I can to predict stuff for you in terms of games or anything else and, like, what's going to happen from time to time, but I fully acknowledge the fact that drawing long-term conclusions about a bunch of 22-year-olds is silly. It's just silly. Y'all be betting money on them. That's where I get confused. You out here betting money on what a college student's going to do. Are you high? By the way, Shannon, Nicole, she just sent a tweet that said, what about white guys who didn't get second chances? And Bradford isn't good? Who lets you talk sports? You probably think Brady is guilty too. The white guys who ain't getting second chances, I just told you about Tim Tebow getting a third. Like, that was a you realize that there was a line for people trying to sign Josh McCown, Shannon?
Yeah, apparently so.
Look, this is all I want to explain to people, because once again, it's an amazing world where, and I'm not like beating the racism drum for the black quarterback. I could, right? But I'm not even, Shannon, I'm not going to go to him, but there's some guy on hold that says white cornerbacks have an even shorter rope. It goes both ways. JP from Arizona says Freeman and Leftwich, fringe black quarterbacks, just aren't that good. Of course not. They're fringe, fool. Like, what other white quarterbacks on the fringe are good?
You know what we should ask about this? A black quarterback.
We'll see on that one.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Bomani.
I got to tell you a little story. So when my parents grew up, when I was growing up, rather, my parents taught at Prairie View A&M University. My mom worked in the business department. There used to be this girl named Kim. They said her last name was Moon. I was little, so I was like, oh, she must be Warren Moon's sister. And then people, like, come on, now just get the same name. Can't be Warren Moon's sister. The next thing I know, one day my mom comes and says, Warren Moon's in the office. You got to come get his autograph. Because she was Warren Moon's sister. So on with us is NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Warren Moon. Warren, what's going on?
Bomani, how you doing today, man?
Hey, man, I'm doing all right. So you don't remember me getting your autograph 27 years ago, but it was a very big deal for me.
I remember giving a few autographs out when I was at Prairie View. I don't remember you specifically, but I remember you other places along the way.
Hey, man, well, I appreciate it. Well, hey, coming into this season, you're in Seattle, man. How do you feel about the Seahawks coming into this year?
You know, I like their football team. I like that they're healthy right now coming out of the preseason. I like the fact that they picked up Jimmy Graham in the offseason, so that makes them more explosive offensively, especially in the red zone. And then their two top picks this year, Tyler Lockett and Frank Clark, have both really played at a high level and are going to really help the team this year, I think, in a lot of different ways. So I like what they have, the experience coming back, and then I think they have that motivation because of the way the Super Bowl ended last year. This team really wants to get back there and finish what they didn't finish last year.
Well, let me ask you this about Russell Wilson, because Russell Wilson has won a Super Bowl. They got to the Super Bowl last year, but this is kind of the first year that Russell Wilson has really been famous. Now, Russell Wilson is everywhere, and Russell Wilson just got his money. What kind of pressures does a quarterback face in that situation where now you're on the field after you've become like a national star?
Well, a lot of guys can put a lot of pressure on themselves if they let them do that. You know, Russell's a guy that's expected all of this. He's a guy that wants to be great, and he continues to work hard to be that way. And so I don't think it's going to affect him that much. He's a guy that hasn't changed any of the things that he's done since he's been there, as far as how much time he spends in the building every day, his preparation, the things he does off the field. You know, he might do a few more things off the field in the off season because he has that time to do it, and he's been invited to a lot of different things. But I still think he's the same guy that wants to be known as one of the better quarterbacks in this league, and he'll work towards doing it. So I think he'll only continually get better. He's only going into his fourth year. He's accomplished a lot, but I think he's got a lot of improvement that he can make, and that's a scary thing for a guy that's had this much success already.
Well, what's one thing that you can point to that you think he needs to improve?
I think he can become more of a rhythm passer in the pocket, more of a just more of a pocket passer in general, not rely so much on his scrambling ability to get outside the pocket and create. You always want to be able to have that, but I think as a quarterback, especially as you get older and you lose some of those skills, you're going to have to rely on being in that pocket and distributing the ball to all your different guys. I know I went through that early in my career. I ran the ball around a lot, but I also understood that once you leave that pocket, those guys will kill you if they get a chance. So you better start just staying in there, move around that pocket, and get the ball to your playmakers and let those guys make the plays with their legs.
All right, we're talking to Warren Moon, and that's actually an interesting question I always wondered about with guys who played in Canada like you did, where you have the wider field and it kind of has more. There's more of an incentive for guys to kind of run around and do those sorts of things. How tough of an adjustment it is to tell yourself, okay, stand still, in spite of the fact that guys are coming to kill you.
It's not so much about standing still. It's the pace of the offense, getting the ball out of your hand in rhythm. Don't sit back there and hold it if you don't need to. You want to try and know where you're going with the football all the time. And I was a guy that always got the ball out of my hands pretty quickly, didn't hold on to it a lot. But I also had the ability to move around and run if I needed to. So as long as you have that in your back pocket, that's good. But you don't want to rely on it too much because, like I said, as you get older, you're going to lose some of those skills, and you better be able to rely on your pocket skills. That's what allows you to play this game a long time. You look at Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, guys like that, they're skilled in the pocket, and that's why they're still around.
All right, now you mentioned Peyton Manning because he is getting older, and the last couple of years, I think he started to look older than he had looked previously, even though the numbers were great. As you get to that age, and you played in the league for 17, 18 years, what's the hardest thing for a quarterback to keep on point as your skills start slipping?
Just keeping that longevity of being sharp late in the season. It's a long, grinding season, especially when you get towards December, January, and your body starts to break down a little bit. And you got to make sure you're doing all the right things. You got to take care of yourself. I had this regimen that I went through the latter part of my career where I got massaged twice a week. I was at a chiropractor twice a week. I did some golly, I can't even think of what it's called right now, but with the needles. What's the
acupuncture.
Yeah, acupuncture, excuse me. Yeah, and I did all of that, and I weight trained. I really took great care of my body, the way I ate, everything. It still doesn't guarantee you're going to get through the season and have that same sharpness at the end of the year. So those are things that you have to do if you want to play this game a long time. And I played till I was 44, and the reason why I was able to do that, I didn't have any major injuries, and I really took good care of myself.
All right, we're talking to Warren Moon, and I was curious, what did you think? I've heard you say that you thought that Robert Griffin probably needed to stop talking, which I think that all of us have thought at one point in time. But what did you think watching that situation play out this preseason?
It's unfortunate, but I just think, first of all, he's in the wrong offense for him. I don't think he fits that offense. And the things that Mike Shanahan did for him when he came in and changed some of the things that Mike Shanahan hadn't really done as a coach when he was in the league really benefited Robert Griffin III and what his skill set was. They got away from that a little bit because Robert, I think, wanted to get away from that. And then Jake Gruden comes in and with his offense, and I just don't think it's an offense that's good for Robert. I think he needs to go somewhere different. I think he needs to go somewhere where they're going to tailor the offense to the things that he does best, because he's definitely still a skilled guy that has, he's got some great skills, some unique skills that a lot of quarterbacks don't have, but it only fits into a certain type of offense. And if a team is willing to do that and cater it around what he does best, I think he can still have success in this league.
Well, I watched what was happening to him from a distance. As somebody who grew up in Houston, I've made a lot of comparisons to what happened with him to what kind of went on with you at a point during the 1993 season, where you were the franchise quarterback and the franchise had been behind you, and then one day it felt like all of a sudden, we're not so behind anymore. Like, as the quarterback, what's it like when you get that feeling that the organization that used to be all the way on board just isn't there anymore?
It's an unsettling feeling. There's no question about it. I mean, I had gone to, I think, 6 or 7 straight Pro Bowls at that time, and all of a sudden I get benched because we get off to a slow start. But then we ended up winning 11 games in a row, and we lost in the playoffs, so I get traded because of that, because of the salary cap and all those different things that were involved at that time. But yeah, it's a very unsettling feeling when you know, or you think you're the guy, you're the face of the franchise. And all of a sudden, they all of a sudden lose confidence in you because you have a bad stretch of ball games. And it's not always all the quarterback's fault. There's no question you have to play good, you have to play better. But to put it all on me, I guess that's what happens, and that's part of the job. You got to have the big shoulders to be able to handle the criticism, because you're going to get a lot of the credit when you probably don't always deserve that as well.
Yeah, I may or may not have referred to Kirk Cousins as the Cody Carlson of Washington after I saw the newspaper spread in the Washington Post. But that's the interesting thing, where you are the starter, and not just the organization doesn't seem behind you, but it seems that everybody around, like, you look up and there's a newspaper spread for the backup quarterback.
Well, the backup quarterback, if the team is struggling, is usually the most popular player in town. There's no question about it. Everybody thinks that that's the answer. Because they always put most of the blame on the quarterback, especially if he's not playing up to what they think he should be. But there's a reason why backup quarterbacks are backup quarterbacks, and it usually shows when they get a chance to play for any long period of time. So, Cody got his chance to play, and he didn't even last his first year. I mean, I think he got hurt that first year. Even in the game that he replaced me, he got hurt in the first half, and I was right back in the lineup again. So it's not always as easy as it looks to be able to go out there and play the game. And there's a reason why you're a starter, and the reason why you've played as long as you haven't had success. Sometimes you go through those stretches where you don't play that well, and there's a lot of things that could contribute to that. But the big thing is I fought through it. I didn't let it get me down. I kept myself ready, and once that opportunity came back again, I was going to be ready to jump on it.
All right. He's NFL Hall of Fame quarterback Warren Moon. My man, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Always great talking to you, brother. You do a good job on this show.
Bomani.
So as you may have heard, your man Roger Goodell got his keister handed to him in court again yesterday. This seems to be a regular part of the Roger Goodell existence, getting his keister handed to him in court. And guess what? Shannon, it sounds like the owners a little bit tired of it.
Yeah. You'd imagine that something was going to have to come down. Goodell's taking too many losses.
Yeah. And because, see, when Goodell loses, they all lose, right? Like, Goodell is the representative of the owners. So if he loses, they lose. So it seems that these owners are like, hey, man, according to the Washington Post here, they're like, hey, I think we need to figure out another way to do this. Right, like maybe they want to go to a neutral arbitrator. How bad does it have to be going for Roger Goodell where they have it in the rules that they don't have to get a neutral arbitrator? And they're like, no, I think a neutral arbitrator is the way we want to go. Yeah. I think somebody not involved with us would be the way to handle this. Look, man, if you got a CBA that gives your commissioner the power to do the things that Roger Goodell does, and now you want to take that power and give it to somebody else, does that not sound like you need a new commissioner? Like, really, basically what you're saying about your commissioner is he can't drive stick. Like, that's what this is. You've got this great sports car, except your driver can't drive stick.
What do you think some of the things that they want to change as far as his power?
Well, basically, if he's going to keep getting his can handed to him, then they want this to go to, like, these sorts of things that then go to, like, a neutral arbitrator. right? Because one of the big problems that they have here, they figured out, is that Goodell dumps a lot of things under conduct detrimental, right? Like that's the catch-all for all these teams and these contracts and everything else is conduct detrimental to the team, and Goodell is taking it a step further to conduct detrimental to the NFL, and the vagaries of that are just too much. So with Tom Brady, I guess the idea of conduct being detrimental to the NFL would then be you got us looking like liars, right? You got us looking like we cheat, and that plus the other stuff wound up adding up to 4 games, and it can't be that. As much as all of us believe that the owners love Roger Goodell and they'll never get rid of Roger Goodell because they love him and he makes them so much money, I would like to ask this question. How hard is it to make money selling the NFL?
I don't anticipate it being the most difficult thing in the world.
Is it that hard to find somebody else that you could put in charge of this league that could make money selling the NFL? Because maybe it is. Like, I'm not discounting the possibility that Roger Goodell is actually really good at his job in ways that, I just don't know or don't see. I also acknowledge that Roger Goodell is in a really tricky place in the job that he has, in that how many more ways are there to make money off of football? Because that's what winds up happening in any corporate structure. The name of the game is growth, right? So people are buying these teams. Franchise value is important. The value of the franchise has a lot to do with not just the revenues you make now, but the revenues that you can reasonably expect. Because if I'm selling a football team to somebody, what I'm really doing is I am taking your money right now in exchange for all the money that you'll make down the line. Like, that's how that works. Give me the money up front, and you'll make this money gradually down the line. They finance it in a certain way. They make their projections, how much money they need to come into per year. That's how they wind up doing it. How much more room is there to grow for the NFL, especially as these cities seem to be bucking back at this idea of building these new stadiums? Well, except for the fact that they then have a tendency to just go ahead and, build the new stadium because nobody wants to lose an NFL team. Like, that's what it comes down to. But I will never buy into this idea that these teams in the NFL will never get rid of Roger Goodell because he makes too much money off of them. I can't believe that these arrogant owners don't believe they can go find somebody else who can do the same thing. I just don't. But for Goodell, a lot of the legend of Roger Goodell was built around player discipline. Like, that's how we realized that this was a man that you had to respect because he had these cats coming in there bowing down for his respect. But he's not Pete Rozelle. Like, when Pete Rozelle did things, everybody trusted what Rozelle did. Everybody did. If the owners have stopped trusting Goodell in that way, what's the next step? Like, really, what's the next step?
So can Goodell's image, legacy, or what have you be saved at this point?
Yeah, he's just got to stay out the news. He's got to stay out of the news. Now, let me tell you something I do find interesting about Goodell that people don't talk enough about. So, say you had a quarterback that was new. Robert Griffin is a great example of this, right? Is a guy who came in with a big spark, and then we got a little tired of him because he was everywhere, right? And we're like, yo, man, maybe you need to just fall back and work on your craft. Like, you don't need to be out here in front of everybody, which I didn't blame Griffin for it because clearly all the money he was getting for those commercials and things, clearly he needs it now. Because he ain't going to get that $16 million option, Like, every dime that he had a chance to get, he needed to get. But I did understand the argument that maybe you need to fall back. Maybe this isn't a good look. Maybe you're starting to fall in love with the spotlight. Roger Goodell's on the cover of Time magazine with the headline, The Enforcer. And I bet if you go to his house, that's framed up in a room somewhere. I bet it's framed up in a room somewhere. Right? Was that not a guy that seemed to fall in love a little bit with the attention? Was that not a guy who didn't seem to fall in love a bit with the idea of being the enforcer, of being the law and order of the league, of being the moral compass of it? Because, look, once you get made the guy who protects all things right, if you're into that sort of thing, I don't see how it doesn't go to your head, especially when whatever you do as Roger Goodell is then determined to be the right thing. Now look how out of hand that got. Look how far that went. Look where that got him. Look at what happened after the Ray Rice thing where Captain Law and Order didn't punish hard enough and then he didn't know what to do because he had to be Mr. Right Thing. And everybody told him, hey, Raj, that wasn't the right thing. You know what? You're right. I'll make sure Ray Rice doesn't play anymore. He lost that one too, by the way. He lost that one too. All right? But that's the guy. That's who he is. And so now the owners, if they want to try to change things as it goes to player discipline, if it's enough of them, they can. But Roger Goodell isn't going to give that away because it seems like that's become part of who he thinks he is. Like he thinks he is the law and order. People don't give up being the law and order like that easily. Doesn't work that way. It's just not that simple. Like, you ever seen a cop that became a security guard? They ready to cuff you up at any moment till somebody reminds them, you know, that gun ain't real. That's just like a decoration. Like, we just gave that to you, so maybe you might command some bit of respect. They take away Roger Goodell's problems. You know what he's going to wind up being? He's going to be the head of the security force at an apartment complex. Like, just because you call yourself lieutenant doesn't mean you are the lieutenant.
Top flight security of the world, Craig.
Not the country, of the world. But here's the thing. If the owners make the decision that they're going to turn these things over to neutral arbitration, like if that's the game that they ultimately wind up playing in changing this, think about what that says. What they're basically saying is, from this point on, whatever Goodell does is going to go to a neutral arbitrator anyway. So we might as well just stop wasting time. Because once they have that system in place where he gets to hear the appeal, that's now actually become a detriment to the NFL. Because now that people don't think the Goodell's punishments are going to wind up standing up, everybody that gets one of those punishments that they appeal to Goodell is then going to wind up taking it to court. And who has time for that stuff to go to court? So you might as well just get a neutral arbitrator and call it a day just to save the time. Like, these things do cost the NFL money. And just because rich people have money doesn't mean they like to spend it on these kind of lawyers. So, hey, it was fun while it lasted, Raj. But if these owners are deciding they want to try to rein you in, let's see how this all goes, huh?
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt. Frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
Bomani.
Happy birthday, Beyonce. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Right Time. My name is Bomani Jones. Thanks for listening on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. We are presented by Progressive Insurance. Happy birthday to Beyonce. Shannon, you want to say happy birthday to Beyonce?
There's other people who have birthdays on this day, too. I'm just going to point that out.
Oh, yeah. Happy birthday to my homeboy Clarence Mitchell out there in L.A. And also, happy birthday to my homegirl Josie Zoni up there in New York City. Love you, girl.
I'm sure they're great people.
They are. I miss anybody else?
Somebody else, too.
I'll think about it later. The hunt for October has begun. Tune in tomorrow as the Cardinals host the Pirates. Coverage begins at 3:30 Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNradio.com, and the ESPN app. Shannon, you going to listen to that game? You going to check it out?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Obviously, of course.
What better way to celebrate the day after Beyonce's birthday, huh?
Yeah.
Just so you guys know, somebody on this show's birthday is today. I just can't remember who it is. Anyway, the Mets. Now, Shannon, you're a Yankees fan, right?
I am.
So you enjoy laughing at the Mets?
No, I'm a Mets sympathizer.
Which means you do enjoy laughing at the Mets?
Absolutely.
I enjoy laughing at the Mets, too. Like, I grew up as a Braves fan. Like, my brother used to love the Mets when I was little. My brother's 13 years older than me, though, so it's like the Darryl Strawberry, Doc Gooden Mets, right? Like, that's what he loved. And I had a soft spot in my heart for the Mets. Like, I have an odd relationship with the Mets because I really, like, as a fan, and I don't really do this anymore, but I came to dislike the Mets when the Braves were rolling and the Mets finally got to be good. Like that one time when the Braves went to the World Series, Kenny Rogers walked Andrew Jones, which is not easy to do with the bases loaded, and that's how he wound up getting the World Series. There was even a brief period of time where John Rocker was my favorite player, in large part because of his willingness to antagonize the Mets, and then he became John Rocker. And, Shannon, my heart was so broken when I read that Sports Illustrated article about John Rocker. I was like, yo, this is my dude. And we finally got a left-handed reliever who throws hard. And then it was just, ooh, you're John Rocker. And it became a problem. And then I went to a Braves-Yankees game at Turner Field the next year, and John Rocker came in the game, and they gave him an ovation like he just came back from Nam. It made me very, very uncomfortable. Like, I'm looking around at the people in the crowd with me like, what y'all clapping for? Like, I thought we were just willing to put up with him. Like, what's the big deal? But anyway, we can't laugh at the Mets so much this year. They're good now. They're winning. They're almost a feel-good story. As good as you can feel about the Mets, right? But good for them, right? I got to admit, though, the Mets' dysfunction is always, like, just around the corner, right? Because let's not forget, this is the team whose owner got in a Ponzi scheme. Where we weren't sure they were going to – but not long ago, we weren't sure if the Mets were going to be able to make payroll.
Right, especially when they got to pay Bobby Bonilla, too.
They do still have to pay Bobby Bonilla. He loved the Mets. How crazy is that? Actually, he might not even love the Mets. Bobby Bonilla might be cashing the Mets checks and rooting for the Pirates. Just taking their money and rooting against them. Hey, check go clear regardless. You can't take it back. But they do have a very interesting situation right now, which is Matt Harvey's coming off the Tommy John. The doctors apparently have said that Matt Harvey should throw 180 innings this year. Small problem with that plan. The Mets are good. The Mets are going to the postseason in all likelihood. And Matt Harvey is really, really good, right? So we saw this happen with Strasburg with the limit in innings. But, Shannon, was that after the Tommy John with Strasburg or before he got hurt?
I'll have to look. I'll have to check. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't remember which one it was, but it was the same situation. So Scott Boras is Matt Harvey's agent. Harvey has pitched 166 in the third innings thus far. Boras believes the cap on these innings should be at 180. The Mets are trying to play this easy, so they have him skip a start to conserve innings. They're going to a six-man rotation, which is the sort of thing that you can do when the Nationals decide to wet the bed, right? You can go to a six-man rotation at a time like this. And so the Mets are trying to get all the innings that count that they can out of Matt Harvey. Like, that's what they're trying to do. But if he's got 4 more regular season starts, I'm looking at this on ESPN.com from Adam Rubin, that'll get Matt Harvey up to almost 200 innings. Like, we're in the 190 inning range, and Scott Boras doesn't want that because Scott Boras is trying to play for that long money. Here's the problem I have with the entirety of this discussion, okay? Why do we still use innings as the measurement of how much somebody has pitched? Like, I understand using innings as the measurement, like, statistically. Like, the stat for innings matters, okay? I get that because the innings just tell exactly what it says. How many innings are you eating up? But the thing about innings is it's not telling you how many pitches are being thrown. So every time I see somebody say with Matt Harvey, for example, well, we're going to cap him at 100-some-odd innings. No. We need to know about pitches.
And types of pitches as well.
Right. Types of pitches and when the pitches are thrown. So, like, the pitches you throw in the first inning are not the same strain on a pitcher's arm as the ones that are thrown in the 7th or 8th. Like, go ahead.
Strasburg's innings limit came after the Tommy John.
After the Tommy John? Okay. Because I didn't know if they were just trying to play as a young guy, just trying to protect his arm. But the bottom line is they are so poor in the ways that they try to measure the wear and tear on a pitcher's arm. Now, what I'm talking about is probably going to require something pretty sophisticated mathematically, right? Like how to figure out what the strain is on all those pitches. But, Shannon, it's baseball. They count everything.
If there was a league, if there was a sport that's in the stats and sabermetrics and all of that stuff, it's baseball.
It is the game that gave us war. It is the game that, if you can come up with war, right, if you can compute war, I'm thinking there's got to be a better way that you can compute wear and tear on a pitcher's arm than just how many outs he got. That's just not giving you the answer that you need. Say, case in point, Clayton Kershaw, I remember last year in the postseason. I always said the problems that Kershaw had in the postseason, you don't really have a great gauge on them because really Kershaw only had 2 bad innings. The problem was the innings that he had that were bad didn't even count as innings. Like, remember when he got rocked by the Giants at Dodger Stadium, and I think he gave up however many runs that was before they yanked him? If you don't get any outs, that's all those pitches, and it doesn't calculate as an inning. So what the hell does that mean for something like Matt Harvey? So if Matt Harvey goes out and faces 5 batters to start the 8th inning and doesn't get any of them out and you pull them out, there's no inning there. Like, this isn't the way to do it. This just doesn't make any sense. Now, as it relates to the actual decision that the Mets have to make, hey, man, we're trying to get him to throw as many pitches as we can. Like, we want him long run, but we haven't won a World Series in 29 years. We got to go for this. Because look at the Nationals. What did they get from that Strasburg situation? What did they get out of it? Nothing. They're not. You see what's happening to them this year. When you have a chance, if I'm the team, and if I'm the team, I'm approaching this just cutthroat capitalism. If I'm the team, yo, man, you got to come back out here. Like, we might only have you pitch 6 or 7, but you're going to have to pitch 6 or 7.
But we're here. We're here. We got to go. Nothing's promised.
We're here, and he wants to pitch. Who doesn't want him to pitch? The dude that's trying to get a percentage for a lifetime. That too. And I don't have a problem with Boris, to be clear. I understand where Boris is coming from, and Boris has got to watch out because they will let him go out there and throw out his arm. Why? Because they're getting him for cheap right now. Like, there will be a time where Matt Harvey costs them a lot of money. That time ain't right now. It's not it. Hey, man, I don't know what they're supposed to do, but I do know this. Matt Harvey doesn't work for Scott Boras. Scott Boras works for Matt Harvey. And if Matt Harvey wants to pitch those games, he's a grown man. He's going to wind up pitching those games. And there's no way you're going to tell him, no, we don't want you to get yourself to the World Series. It's not happening. All right, stick around with us. When we come back, Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders will be with us. Get you ready for the NFL season. Tell you about things from their Football Outsiders Almanac.
Bomani.
He's the editor-in-chief at Football Outsiders. They've got a football almanac that's out that I recommend that you guys check out. Lots of information for the season coming up. His name is Aaron Schatz. Aaron, how are you?
I'm good, and I am ready for some football.
Let me ask you a question, because I always wonder when I talk to guys who do a lot of analytics stuff with football, how much do you enjoy football? Because I think the perception for people who aren't so inclined is that you guys get so caught in the numbers that it almost stops being a game.
I know. They probably think I'm sitting here in a lab coat or something. I mean, I watch like a fan. I have my team. You know, I grew up in the Boston area. I am a Patriots fan, open about it. So when my team is playing, you know, I scream and yell at the television the way anybody else does. When I'm watching other teams, I tend to be a little bit more analytical. You know, I'll probably be babbling more about coaches going for it on 4th downs than your average fan would be. But, you know, I scream at the TV at crazy plays as much as any other fan would. And, you know, I can't imagine that anybody who does analytics enjoyed Odell Beckham's one-handed catch any less than anyone else last year.
All right, well, let me ask you this. You mentioned about the Patriots. Coming into this year, they won the Super Bowl last year, but I think one could make the argument that having Darrelle Revis mattered as much, if not more, than having Tom Brady, and they don't have Darrelle Revis anymore. How does it look for them this year?
Well, we actually have them in our new projections that are updated for Tom Brady not being suspended. We actually have them with the highest average wins in all our simulations, although they're not the best team. Seattle's the best team, but they have a harder schedule. So we think that the front seven is going to be better, and there's going to be improvements on offense as well that may neutralize the fact that the quarterbacks are going to be much, much worse. So we actually have New England not with as good a defense as they had last year, but still a slightly above average defense. And the thing about the Patriots is special teams are so inconsistent from year to year, but not for New England. New England has been above average on special teams every year since 1996. That's back not only before Belichick, but before Pete Carroll was the head coach in New England. And they've been top 5 the last 4 years. And that's sort of like this hidden extra bonus that always puts them among the league's best teams when you add in Brady in the offense and, let's say, an average defense.
All right, talking to Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders, and I was one of those people who was ready to bury Brady after 4 games last year. And even though they won the Super Bowl, I've been one of those people that's a bit skeptical about his arm strength and what he does down the field at this point in his career. Am I being unfair to Tom Brady?
Oh, not at all. The arm strength is not what it once was at all. And if you can see that in the Football Outsiders Almanac, we've got some stats that reflect how Tom Brady has been on deep passes over recent years, and there's no question that he has not been as good as he was back in the days of Randy Moss. He simply can't power the ball down the field. Last year on deep passes, which is 16 or more yards to the air, he completed only 38% of them compared to 49% back in 2010 and 2011. The yards per attempt used to be 14 or 15 every year. Now it's like 9 or 10 every year. There's no question the arm strength's not there. He does it all with picking his spots, with the shorter passes, matriculating the ball up the field, as they say, and it's not with the deep pass at all.
Well, it's also a similar situation, I guess, that Peyton Manning is in, and it isn't a problem for Peyton Manning until it becomes a problem. When we saw him at the end of last year, though, he looked to be so broken down. How are you feeling about him and the Broncos this season?
Yeah, I mean, it is really hard from an analytical perspective to figure out the Broncos' offense because analytics are so much about looking at teams through the window of what has happened in the past. But there is no what has happened in the past. We've never had a quarterback as great as Peyton Manning who declined the way he did in the second half of last year with a question about whether it was age-related or injury-related. I mean, I suppose the closest thing we might have would be that second half of the year when Brett Favre spent that 1 year with the Jets. He had injury problems, but we knew that was injury problems. Here's the thing about Denver, though. People forget how good that defense is. We project them to be one of the top 5 or 6 defenses in the league. And that means that even if you expect that Peyton Manning is not going to be the Peyton Manning of old, as long as he's still a top 10 quarterback or a top dozen quarterback, that defense with Chris Harris and Aqib Talib and Von Miller, that is such a good defense that team is going to be one of the top teams in the league. It doesn't need Peyton Manning to be the best quarterback in the league to be an 11 or 12-1 team.
All right, we're talking to Aaron Schatz of FootballOutsiders.com. And speaking of quarterback, Sam Bradford, we really haven't seen him play in a year and a half, at least not in a regular season game. We now see him in this new Chip Kelly offense. What's Football Outsiders telling us about the Eagles?
Well, I will say that historically there really is not a lot of indication that having these fabulous preseason games is an indicator of anything. So I wouldn't get too excited about how good the Eagles look in the preseason. It's really tough to imagine what Bradford's going to do in that offense just because that offense is so unlike anything else. We know that it made Mark Sanchez better, but it didn't make Mark Sanchez great. So, I mean, if Bradford is the quarterback he was in St. Louis, he was kind of average at best. So maybe he becomes slightly above average in Philadelphia. So overall, I mean, we think Philadelphia and Dallas are going to be neck and neck for the NFC East, and they're definitely two good teams, but they're two good teams that, you know, Philly in particular is going to take advantage of a slightly easier than average schedule. I don't think they're the top Super Bowl contenders in the NFC. I mean, no one comes close to Seattle. Seattle goes into the season as the most probable top team in the league, no question about it. But Philadelphia and Dallas are going to be in a battle till the end with each other, and whichever one loses that battle will probably win a wild card.
Well, we also got this other thing with the Eagles, and you mentioned this in Football Outsiders, is the curse of 370, which you guys kind of expanded, 390 carries, including the postseason. And DeMarco Murray had all those carries last year. The Eagles' plan is to split those carries up, but is that enough to spare a guy like Murray?
I don't know. We're going to have to see. I mean, I will say that, you know, the curse of 370 is not a definitive, like, absolutely, as soon as you carry the ball the 371st time, your leg breaks. And some guys, you know, who have declined, they didn't necessarily decline 1 year after. They did 2 years after. And there's also the fact that Chip Kelly uses all these sports science guys that he has on staff to try to minimize injuries. And they've been among the 2 or 3 least injured teams in the NFL over the last couple of years. They believe that they can keep DeMarco Murray healthy and on the field by monitoring his workload, not only in games, but in practices and in the preseason. And I wish them good luck because you want the best players in the league to be on the field. But we'll have to see historically. I mean, Murray was not the most healthy player before last year. He had injury problems pretty much every year until last year. So there's a lot in his past combined with the total carries from last year that makes you wonder if he can stay healthy all year. The good thing for the Eagles is if he gets hurt, they've got Ryan Matthews and they've got Darren Sproles.
Well, there's also another thing that you mentioned in the almanac, which is the role that offensive lines play in rushing and passing offenses, rushing offense and in pass protection. Could you tell people about that? Because Murray played behind a pretty good offensive line last year.
Yeah, Murray played behind, I think, what most people would agree is the best offensive line in the league. If you look at numbers from year to year, there's no question that offensive lines get too much of the credit or blame for sack totals and not enough of the credit or blame for running. And, I mean, Denver fans know this well because they went through year after year of anybody can gain 1,000 yards in the Denver offense because of what the scheme was and because of the quality of the offensive line. But that's probably true in Dallas, and I think the Cowboys believe that, or else they wouldn't have tried to depend on a committee of Joseph Randle and Darren McFadden this year. They would have gone out and got themselves a big name to be running back for the Cowboys, but they believe in their offensive line. At the same time, we know that quarterback's ability to get rid of the ball when under pressure has more of an impact on the sack totals and the pass pressure than people tend to realize. And the offensive line don't have quite as much of an impact. And a great example of that is, all these years that Peyton Manning would have a bunch of nobodies on his offensive line in Indianapolis, and he still would have fewer sacks than anybody in the league. And so even with the problems they have on the offensive line in Denver this year, I think we can expect that Manning will once again be near the bottom of the league in sacks because he gets rid of the ball before they can sack it. Now, the question is, will that line be good enough to block for C.J. Anderson? We'll have to see about that.
All right, we're talking to Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. And in looking at all 32 teams analytically, is there any team that jumps out that you, from the analytics, tells you they're going to be pretty good, but most people probably wouldn't expect?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of teams that are pretty defense-oriented that we like a little bit better than conventional wisdom. St. Louis is one. Minnesota is one. I think people like Minnesota a lot, but we like them more because of their defense than because of their offense. But the big team that I think we think is better than conventional wisdom is the New York Jets. And I know everyone likes to laugh at the Jets, and their offense is probably still going to be worth laughing at because, they're the Jets and they're not going to be good. But that defense is going to really be something because there are some really strong trends. First of all, they have the fewest turnovers per drive of any defense of the last 20 years. That is just not sustainable. They are going to have more picks. They are going to have more fumble recoveries, and that's a huge difference for that defense. But then on top of that, sort of the statistical trend that's out of their hands, they also went out and they signed a ton of new talent at a position where they had huge weaknesses last year. And based on the metric that we used in our projection system, the Jets signed more new defensive talent this offseason than any team in the last dozen years except the 2009 Detroit Lions. And all the teams that were among the teams that added the most free agent defensive talent all had huge upgrades on their defense, in total. And that doesn't even include the fact that the Jets also used the number 6 overall pick in the draft on a defensive player who a lot of people thought was probably the best bet to become a star of any player in the draft at any position.
All right, last question for Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. I'm just curious about this after flipping through the almanac. Analytically speaking, and forgive me if this question is too vague to really give an answer to, but is there any way to tell what is really the role of coaching and the what you get from having one coach versus another in this league?
I know. That is hard. That is one of the holy grail, along with being able to predict NFL success for rookies so teams can draft smarter. The other holy grail is figuring out just what coaching means. It's tough, man, because we tried to isolate it at one point, but what we ended up with was a measure of all intangibles. And there was nothing that said that measurement was coaching. It could have just been health. It could have been luck. It could have been character. It could have been team chemistry in the locker room. It was just a measure of sort of intangibles. And it's really hard to figure out what coaching means. And Arizona really strongly comes into play here because our numbers say that Arizona is not the Super Bowl contender that a lot of people think they are. But Bruce Arians' teams have completely outperformed projections for the last 3 years since he became a head coach in that interim year in Indianapolis. And he always wins more close games than you would expect. His teams always play better than their other stats would, indicate. You wonder, is there something about Bruce Arians? Is he just that good a coach? And the problem is we don't know. There's not a lot of information to let us know whether he's really that good or not.
All right, he's Aaron Schatz, Football Outsiders, editor-in-chief. Go to footballoutsiders.com. Check out their 2015 Football Outsiders Almanac. A lot of great information, a lot of good things for you to think about with the football season. Aaron, thank you so much. Look forward to having you back on again.
Absolutely, Matt. It's great to be on the show.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Weeknights from 9 to 11 Eastern or on demand at ESPNradio.com.